Hey guys, Kelade here. As you guys may or may not know, patch 7.2 is dropping on the next server reset, so that's either going to be on Tuesday for US or on Wednesday for EU. And also, as an hour ago, Blizzard did release their changes for Keystone rewards in patch 7.2. And it does seem like the difficulty of that will also increase for all of these dungeons, so it looks like a Mythic plus 10 in patch 7.2 will be roughly equivalent in difficulty as what is currently now Mythic 15 in patch 7.15. The biggest takeaway is that now you only need a plus 10 clear any in the upcoming weeks. Especially, there is also an increase at the bottom here. If you guys see, Mythic 10 plus rewards will give you 905 eye level loot, which is 5 eye levels higher than what you can currently get by completing a plus 15. So that's great. And this is effective this week. So you guys actually only need to do a plus 10 this week. But that's also taking into account that, these mythic dungeons are going to be much harder. So if you guys haven't gotten your plus 15 achievements yet, and you guys are on track and you guys are able to do it, I would heavily suggest that you guys go and do them now this week before patch 7.2 hits, in which case it will be much, much harder to get that plus 15 achievement. I also did want to kind of talk to you guys about Fury Warriors and Mythic Plus, and kind of how we kind of set up, right? So in Mythic Plus, the talents that you're gonna run is always gonna be this setup right here. War Machine, Shockwave, Avatar, Bounding Stride, Frothing Berserker, Inner Rage, and Reckless Abandon. If you do have the Legendary Belt, of course you would use that belt, and you can take Wrecking Ball if you desire. But the difference between Wrecking Ball and Avatar is really based on your comp and what dungeon you do, and that's gonna be the case for pretty much everything, right? That, when you guys ask me questions about what talents to take, it really depends on your group and what you guys do, right? For example, the way that we do Mythic Tychondrius in our guild, our melee doesn't AoE the Bloods, right? So there's no reason for me to really need to take War Machine. So I can take Endless Rage when we're doing Mythic Tychondrius. But for your basic setup, for the majority of people, this is the talent setup you want to run for Mythic Plus of all varying degrees of difficulty. Just because War Machine, the haste that you get is just crazy. And even if it's on a something like Tyrannical, it's really not a big deal unless you guys can barely kill the boss. Especially because the majority of your dungeon you're gonna be fighting ads, so you definitely want to be prepared to kill ads versus just killing bosses. And the other key thing that this is pretty I think warrior or slash fury warrior specific. But if you're a class that can take advantage of active trinkets, I heavily advise you do this. Is you create multiple gear sets, right? So for me, I currently have 3 gear sets. One is my single target gear setup, which uses Convergence of Fates and Draft of Souls, right? So if I know I'm going to be fighting a boss next, I'll equip it the pack before. That way, my Draft of Souls cooldown will be ready to be used for on the boss. So my other 2 equipment sets that I do have is an equipment set that I have called Wind, which is just the same thing, except instead of a Draft of Souls, I have a Windscar Whetstone equipped. I'll go into this specific item in a second. The third one I have is another set of AoE equips. Of course, I'm using Killjaden's Burning Wish here instead, so I did have to take off the Legendary Cloak. I just kind of have a random cloak here as a placeholder. So what you do want to do in a Mythic Plus is that you want to constantly switch between these trinkets. Because in Mythic Plus, you can swap trinkets as you like. And it's all about, how fast you can clear ads, how fast you can clear the trash, right? So what I generally do is, depending on the dungeon, right? Depending on what's the first pull that happens at the beginning of a Mythic Plus. Generally, it's going to be an AoE. Let's just take Maw for example. There's a huge AoE pool, right? So I'll walk into the dungeon with my Windscar Whetstone setup. I'll go in and I'll pop all my cooldowns, pop my AoE, pop my Odin's Fury, plus Windscar Whetstone. This Windscar Whetstone right here in 885 actually does much more DPS than my Odin's Fury even does. So that's just kind of the value of active trinkets. It's really high. And once you guys make equipment sets, you can literally just, once you're in this equipment manager, you can just take the icon and you can drag it onto your bars, and then you can just have it hotkey. That way, if I press, let's say I go to this is my single target setup, right? If I just press this hotkey, which for me is Shift X, I'll just put on the equipment. So you can easily swap equipments that way, just with keybinds. So I have 3 different keybinds for all 3 of my trinket setups essentially, right? One single target and two AoE. And as far as for the strength of these trinkets, the trinket that I have found to be the best, and I think it is the best for generally everybody, is for at least for Fury Warriors, it's going to be the Windscar Whetstone, right? Because you really want those active trinkets that you can really stack with Battlecry. So Windscar Whetstone is really strong. If you can't get your hands on Windscar Whetstone, there's always Seed Pod, across from Nathendra, back in Ian, if you guys ever run Ian again. Of course, if you can get Killdraden's Burning Wish, this trinket is also really strong. The only thing is that it doesn't really get buffed by much. Though there is a bug currently in the game that Killdraden's Burning Wish does work with our Battlecry extra crit damage trait. So you still do want to use this in Battlecry, but you don't have to worry if you're enraged or not, or frothing berserker or not. You just do want to use it in Battlecry if you can, though. If you can, it's not a huge deal because it crits anyways. Some other alternatives are Tony's Promise from Kara. It's a relatively strong trinket, but you kind of need the chest to go along with it, and you kind of need a high level. And then until 7.2 drops, and until we get Mythic Plus Kara, it will be hard to get that trinket to be a high level. But once Kara Mythic Plus comes around, we'll be able to get higher eye levels of that trinket. So maybe that might be a good option for a lot of you. So that's really it for as far as active trinkets to go. I mean, those ones really make up for it. Oh, there's also this caster trinket. I mean, you can use it if you want. The only problem is that you need to be 20 yards away. So you're obviously going to use it, and then you're going to charge in and then pop everything, right? Hopefully, you're going to charge in before that orb hits. And that way, when the orb hits, it'll be buffed by everything. And then there's a couple of what I would call inactive AoE trinkets, right? So you have something like the Claw of the Crystalline Scorpid, and you also have this here, Terrorbound Nexus, right? Both of them kind of do an AoE, but you can't time it, right? You can't force it to activate since they're passive trinkets. And I put them on the same tier of passive trinkets as Convergence of Fates, right? Because Convergence of Fates will allow you more battle cries, and if you just use battle cry with whirlwinds, that's still really good AoE burst. So if you can have 81 of these three trinkets, Convergence, Terrorbound Nexus, Claw of the Crystalline Scorpid, or even something like this, an Eternal Urn that has high mastery on it, that can also be good too for like your inactive trinket slot. So I highly recommend you guys, when you guys are doing Mythic Plus, you have an inactive trinket and an active trinket, and you just keep swapping the active trinket every time you put it on cooldown. Because the biggest reason why is Windscar Whetstone has a 2-minute cooldown, right? So after you use it, you're not gonna have it up for a while. And when you swap trinkets, even if they were done with cooldowns, there's only a 30-second cooldown. So essentially, it allows you to have much more active trinket uses. So it should be a pretty big increase to your general AoE for a dungeon if you guys haven't used it yet. As far as the inactive trinket rankings, I would definitely place Conversion of Fates as the highest, and then I would place Terrorbound Nexus, and then it would be Claw the Crystalline Scorpid. The biggest reason why I would play Terrorbound Nexus above Claw the Crystalline Scorpid is that it AoEs around you instead of just in front of you, which allows us to essentially have a bigger AoE range. I did go a lot of this over in that I think Quarter Stars commentary video, but I just wanted to put this in this Mythic Plus video so you guys are able to take advantage of this in case you guys didn't see that video. Definitely recommend that you guys do the trinket swaps if you guys have the trinkets. A lot of you guys have also asked me about the different affixes and how to handle them, but I think a lot of you guys know the bane of our existence right now in Mythic Plus is really just skittish. Maybe in 7.2, bursting will also be a pretty big issue, but I mean, skittish is the huge thing, right? You literally hit battle cry, you hit anything else, and you'll pull aggro. That's just the way it is essentially, and I think a lot of that is few warriors just generally have a lot of threat aggro in the beginning of pulls because we're critting for 100%, for 7 seconds. And then on top of that, you have all the skittish factors, really pumping up our threat. There's just no way we're not gonna have aggro. So my advice to you guys when there's skittish week and you really want to do Mythic Plus, it's really to just do this, right? You just go over here, you click on this thing called protection, and you activate that spec because that's really the best way to get around it. I mean, unless you like dying over and over in Mythic Plus, this is the way. But realistically, if you really do have the DPS as Fury Warriors, sometimes it's really just better to just jump in, shockwave them, CC chain with another party member, use all of your burst OE, get the ass down as fast as you can. If you can get them, if you can burst them all down to like 20% HP and they kill you anyways, did you really lose time there, right? Maybe that was helpful, right? So it's not necessarily bad if you always die, but just be aware. If you go in and you pop your AoE burst on ads during skittish, you're very likely gonna die. So if you guys haven't done at least a plus 10 Mythic plus yet, I heavily recommend you do it because you will get a 905 eye level loot at the next reset. Also, make sure before you even open the chest, you do start doing that new quest line that Khadgar is going to give you in Dollar Run. So that way you're at AK-26. So you can have more AP come out of the chest when you open your weekly caches. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more warrior content. See ya!